The year was 1939, a year that would soon be etched into the annals of history as the beginning of one of the most devastating conflicts the world had ever seen. Europe stood on a knife's edge, teetering between a fragile peace and the abyss of war. The streets of European cities buzzed with an uneasy tension, a palpable sense of dread that hung in the air. The Great War, a conflict so horrific it was meant to end all wars, was a fresh scar on the continent's memory. The trenches, the barbed wire, the endless rows of white crosses marking the graves of the fallen. These were the haunting reminders of a past that many hoped would never repeat itself. Yet the seeds of another global conflict were already being sown. Nationalism, militarism, and a thirst for revenge were on the rise, and the drums of war began to beat once more. In Germany, Adolf Hitler, a charismatic demagogue, had risen to power. His fiery speeches and grandiose promises captivated a nation desperate for change, a nation still reeling from the economic and social upheaval caused by the Great War. Fueled by resentment over the Treaty of Versailles and driven by a twisted ideology of racial purity, Hitler harbored ambitions of expanding the German Reich. He saw the treaty as a humiliation, a shackle that needed to be broken for Germany to reclaim its rightful place in the world. His eyes were set eastward, on the fertile lands of Poland, which he believed belonged to the German people. The rich soil, the strategic location, Poland was the key to his vision of a greater Germany. Across Europe, a sense of foreboding grew. Newspapers carried ominous headlines, and conversations in cafes and homes were filled with anxiety and speculation. The specter of war loomed large, casting a long shadow over the continent. The League of Nations, created in the aftermath of the Great War to prevent future conflicts, proved toothless and ineffective. Its lofty ideals were no match for the harsh realities of international politics and the ambitions of aggressive leaders. Appeasement, the policy of giving in to Hitler's demands in the hope of avoiding war, had only emboldened him further. Leaders like Neville Chamberlain believed that by conceding to some of Hitler's territorial ambitions, they could maintain peace. But each concession only fueled his appetite for more. The world watched with bated breath, knowing that the fragile peace held together by hope and wishful thinking could shatter at any moment. Radio broadcasts carried the latest updates, and people gathered around, their faces etched with worry and fear. The storm clouds were gathering, and the first drops of rain were about to fall. The fuse was lit, and the countdown to war had begun. The question was not if, but when and where the explosion would happen. The question was, where would the explosion happen? The answer would soon become tragically clear, as the world stood on the brink of a conflict that would change the course of history forever. In the late summer of 1939, the world watched in astonishment as Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, two ideological archenemies, signed a non-aggression pact. This unexpected alliance between Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, leaders of two diametrically opposed regimes, left the global community in shock and disbelief. The pact was not just a political maneuver, it was a seismic shift in the balance of power in Europe. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, named after the foreign ministers of the two countries, sent shockwaves across the globe. The agreement was signed by Vyacheslav Molotov of the Soviet Union and Joachim von Ribbentrop of Nazi Germany. It was a moment that would forever alter the course of history, as the world leaders scrambled to understand the implications of this newfound alliance. Publicly, the pact proclaimed a commitment to peace between the two nations. Propaganda from both sides heralded the agreement as a step towards stability and cooperation. Newspapers and radio broadcasts were filled with messages of mutual respect and non-aggression, painting a picture of harmony that belied the true nature of the agreement. Secretly, however, it contained a sinister agreement. Behind closed doors, the two powers had negotiated a clandestine protocol that would divide Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. This secret clause was a blueprint for the dismemberment of nations and the subjugation of millions. Eastern Europe, including Poland, was to be carved up between the two totalitarian powers. The map of Europe was redrawn in secret, with entire countries being allocated to either the Nazi or Soviet sphere. This division was not just a political arrangement, it was a prelude to invasion and occupation. Hitler had secured his eastern border and ensured that any attack on Poland would not result in a two-front war. This strategic move allowed him to focus his military might on the west, confident that the Soviet Union would not interfere. It was a calculated risk that paid off, setting the stage for the Blitzkrieg that would soon follow. The pact was a betrayal of Poland, which had sought assurances of support from both Germany and the Soviet Union. Polish leaders were left in a precarious position, having placed their trust in promises that were now rendered meaningless. The nation found itself caught between two ruthless aggressors, with little hope of external aid. It was a cynical exercise in realpolitik, with both sides prioritizing their own interests over any sense of morality or international law. The pact exemplified the ruthless pragmatism that defined the era, where power and survival took precedence over principles and ethics. It was a stark reminder of the lengths to which nations would go to secure their ambitions. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact removed the last obstacle to Hitler's plans for eastward expansion. With the Soviet Union neutralized, he could proceed with his aggressive strategy without fear of immediate retaliation. The pact was a green light for the invasion of Poland, which would ignite the flames of World War II. With the stroke of a pen, the fate of Poland and indeed the world was sealed. The agreement marked the beginning of a dark chapter in history where diplomacy was overshadowed by deceit and treachery. The consequences of this pact would be felt for generations as the world plunged into the chaos of war. The countdown to war had begun. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was not just a diplomatic agreement, it was a ticking time bomb that would soon explode, engulfing the world in conflict. The stage was set for a global confrontation that would reshape the course of history. At dawn on September 1st, 1939, the German war machine roared to life. The world was about to witness a new and terrifying form of warfare that would change the face of battle forever. Explosions ripped through the morning air as the Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, launched a devastating surprise attack on Polish airfields, cities, and communication centers. The sky was filled with the ominous drone of aircraft engines, and the ground shook with the force of relentless bombing. The invasion of Poland had begun. German infantry and armored divisions crossed the border with precision and speed, overwhelming the Polish defenses with their sheer might and coordination. What followed was a brutal demonstration of a new form of warfare, blitzkrieg or lightning war. This strategy relied on rapid, coordinated attacks to quickly incapacitate the enemy, leaving them no time to mount an effective defense. Combining fast-moving tanks with relentless air attacks and mobile infantry, the German army punched holes in the Polish defenses. The speed and ferocity of the assault left the Polish forces scrambling to respond. Polish forces, though courageous, were outmatched and outgunned. They fought valiantly, but the technological and numerical superiority of the German forces was overwhelming. The Polish cavalry, armed with lances and sabers, made for valiant but ultimately futile charges against German tanks. These brave soldiers, steeped in tradition, faced the harsh reality of modern mechanized warfare. The Polish Air Force, hopelessly outnumbered, was decimated within days. Despite their best efforts, they could not withstand the relentless onslaught of the Luftwaffe. The world watched in horror as Poland, the first victim of Nazi aggression, was overrun. Cities were reduced to rubble, and the lives of countless civilians were shattered. Despite the ferocity of the German attack, the Polish people did not surrender. They showed incredible resilience and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. From the first day of the invasion, ordinary citizens took up arms to defend their homeland. Men, women, and even children joined the fight, using whatever means they had at their disposal. They fought with whatever they could find: hunting rifles, pistols, even homemade Molotov cocktails. The streets of Polish cities became battlegrounds, with civilians engaging in fierce street fighting against the invaders. Their courage and determination would become a symbol of Polish resistance throughout the war. The spirit of the Polish people, unbroken and defiant, would inspire others to stand against tyranny and oppression. The Polish army, though ill-equipped and facing overwhelming odds, fought bravely against the German invaders. One of the most heroic stands took place at Westerplatte, a small Polish military outpost in the free city of Danzig. Outnumbered and under constant bombardment from the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein, the 200 Polish defenders held out for 7 days. In Warsaw, the Polish capital, civilians joined soldiers in a desperate defense of the city. Women and children helped to build barricades, deliver messages, and care for the wounded. The city's radio station continued to broadcast defiant messages of resistance, even as German bombs rained down. the Polish people's courage was not limited to the battlefield. Even as their country was overrun, they began to organize a resistance movement. The Polish underground state, one of the largest and most effective resistance movements of the war, was formed. Its members would go on to sabotage German operations, gather intelligence, and provide aid and comfort to those in hiding. And so, the once formidable alliance began to show cracks. Tensions rose as differing ideologies clashed and trust began to wane. The unity that had driven their early successes now seemed like a distant memory. Each faction, driven by their own ambitions, started to chart separate courses. The consequences of these divisions would soon become all too apparent. The question now was, could they find a way back to unity, or would their divisions lead to their ultimate downfall? As the conflict raged on, many nations found themselves drawn into a war that seemed far from their shores. The impact was felt worldwide, altering the course of history for countless people. In the darkest hour, hope seemed a distant memory. The world stood on the brink, with the outcome uncertain. Yet, even in the face of overwhelming odds, resilience and determination began to shine through the shadows. The tide began to turn as Allied forces embarked on the road to liberation. Inch by inch, they reclaimed territories, bringing hope to millions. The sacrifices made were immense, but the spirit of freedom drove them forward. With battles spanning continents, it truly was a world at war. Every corner of the globe felt the tremors of conflict, as nations united and clashed in a struggle that would define the future for generations to come.